What if the next economic crisis is not just another recession? What if what's coming is something deeper, longer lasting, and far more disruptive to the lives of ordinary Americans? Throughout history, there have been moments when countries faced challenges that went beyond the normal ups and downs of the business cycle. These periods were marked by rising debt, political division, declining purchasing power, and growing uncertainty about the future. Today, many of those same warning signs are appearing again. While most people are focused on inflation, interest rates, and stock market movements, a much larger shift may be unfolding beneath the surface. The question is not whether we will experience economic pain. The question is whether we are entering a period that is worse than a traditional recession. A recession is something most people understand. Businesses slow down, unemployment rises, consumers spend less money, and economic growth turns negative. Eventually, governments and central banks step in with policies designed to stimulate the economy. After a period of difficulty, growth returns and the cycle begins again. But history shows that some crises cannot be solved so easily. When debt levels become too large, when governments run persistent deficits, and when trust in institutions begins to erode, the solutions that worked in previous recessions become less effective. Instead of a short downturn, economies can experience years of stagnation, instability, and declining living standards. One of the biggest concerns today is debt. Debt itself is not necessarily bad. It allows people to buy homes, businesses to expand, and governments to invest in infrastructure. The problem occurs when debt grows faster than income. Over time, borrowers become increasingly dependent on new borrowing just to maintain their current lifestyles. This creates a cycle that becomes difficult to sustain. In the United States, government debt has reached levels that would have seemed unimaginable decades ago. At the same time, consumers, corporations, and local governments also carry significant financial obligations. The system works as long as confidence remains high, but when confidence weakens, debt can quickly become a major source of instability. The challenge becomes even greater when interest rates rise. For years, low interest rates made borrowing cheap. Governments could finance deficits, corporations could refinance loans, and consumers could afford larger mortgages. But higher rates change the equation. Suddenly, servicing existing debt becomes more expensive. Money that could have been spent on investment, innovation, or consumption must instead be directed toward interest payments. This slows economic activity and places additional pressure on already strained budgets. Another issue that worries many long-term investors is the growing gap between rich and poor. Wealth inequality has reached levels that are creating social and political tensions across the country. When large segments of the population feel left behind, frustration grows. Economic systems function best when people believe they have opportunities to improve their lives. If that belief disappears, trust in institutions begins to weaken. Political polarization increases, making it more difficult for governments to implement effective policies. Economic challenges become political challenges, and political challenges eventually become economic challenges. History teaches us that periods of extreme inequality often coincide with major societal changes. The reason is simple. When economic gains are concentrated among a small percentage of the population, demand growth becomes weaker. Most economic activity depends on millions of people spending money. If wages fail to keep pace with the cost of living, consumers eventually reduce spending. Businesses see lower revenues, investment slows, and economic growth weakens. Over time, this can contribute to a cycle of stagnation that resembles something worse than a normal recession. Inflation adds another layer of complexity. Many Americans have already experienced the impact of rising prices, housing costs, healthcare expenses, education fees, and everyday necessities have become increasingly expensive. Even when inflation rates decline from their peaks, prices often remain elevated for families living paycheck to paycheck. This creates tremendous pressure. The challenge is that governments face difficult choices. Fighting inflation often requires tighter monetary policy, which can slow economic growth. Stimulating growth, on the other hand, can risk reigniting inflation. Balancing these objectives becomes increasingly difficult when debt levels are already high. Global competition is also reshaping the economic landscape. For decades, the United States operated in a world where its economic dominance was rarely questioned. Today, that environment is changing. Emerging powers are expanding their influence, supply chains are being reorganized, and geopolitical tensions are increasing. Economic conflicts now extend beyond tariffs and trade agreements. They involve technology, energy, manufacturing, and strategic resources. These shifts create uncertainty for businesses and investors, making long-term planning more challenging. One of the most important lessons from history is that major crises often occur gradually and then suddenly. For years, warning signs may be ignored because daily life appears relatively normal. Markets continue functioning, businesses continue operating, and consumers continue spending. Then a trigger event exposes underlying vulnerabilities. Confidence falls rapidly, financial conditions tighten, and problems that were manageable suddenly become severe. The financial crisis of 2008 demonstrated how quickly stability can disappear when systemic weaknesses are exposed. Many people assume that central banks can always prevent major economic disasters. While central banks play a crucial role in stabilizing economies, their tools are not unlimited. Lowering interest rates becomes difficult when rates are already low. Creating additional money can help in certain circumstances, but excessive money creation risks undermining confidence in the currency. Policymakers today face constraints that did not exist in previous decades. This means future challenges may require solutions that are more complex and politically difficult. Technology presents both opportunities and risks. Artificial intelligence, automation, and advanced computing have the potential to increase productivity dramatically. They could create new industries, improve efficiency, and raise living standards. However, these technologies may also disrupt labor markets. Millions of workers could face uncertainty as machines perform tasks that previously required human labor. Economic transitions of this magnitude are rarely smooth. While new opportunities emerge, the adjustment process can be painful for many individuals and communities. The housing market represents another area of concern. Housing affordability has become a major issue across much of America. Rising home prices combined with higher mortgage rates have placed homeownership out of reach for many families. Housing plays a central role in household wealth and consumer confidence. If affordability continues deteriorating, the consequences could extend far beyond the real estate sector. Reduced mobility, delayed family formation, and lower consumer spending can all affect broader economic growth. At the same time, demographic changes are creating new challenges. An aging population means fewer workers supporting a growing number of retirees. This places pressure on pension systems, healthcare programs, and government budgets. Demographic trends unfold slowly, but their economic effects can be profound. Countries that fail to adapt often experience slower growth and increasing fiscal strain. Another factor that should not be ignored is trust. Economies are built on trust. People trust banks to safeguard deposits. Investors trust companies to report accurate information. Citizens trust governments to manage public finances responsibly. When trust declines, economic activity becomes less efficient and more fragile. Individuals become cautious. Businesses delay investment, and financial markets become more volatile. Rebuilding trust after it has been lost is extremely difficult. What makes the current situation unique is that many of these challenges are occurring simultaneously: high debt, political polarization, wealth inequality, geopolitical competition, technological disruption, demographic pressures, and declining trust are interacting with one another. Each issue alone would be manageable. Together, they create a complex environment that increases the risk of unexpected outcomes. This does not mean disaster is inevitable. History also shows that societies can adapt and overcome enormous challenges. Innovation, entrepreneurship, sound policy decisions, and institutional reforms have repeatedly helped nations navigate difficult periods. The future is not predetermined. Outcomes depend on the choices made by leaders, businesses, and individuals. For investors, the key lesson is preparation rather than prediction. No one can forecast the future with certainty. Instead of trying to predict exactly what will happen, it is often more effective to build resilience, diversification, prudent risk management, and a long-term perspective become especially important during uncertain times. Financial success is not about avoiding every downturn. It is about surviving and adapting when downturns occur. For workers and families, adaptability may be the most valuable asset. Skills that remain relevant in changing economic environments can provide security and opportunity. Continuous learning, financial discipline, and flexibility become increasingly important as technological and economic changes accelerate. The future will likely reward those who are prepared to evolve alongside it. Perhaps the most important question is not whether something worse than a recession is coming. The more important question is whether we are prepared for a world that may look very different from the one we have known. Economic systems change, financial orders evolve, power shifts between nations, technologies transform industries. These developments are normal parts of history, even though they often feel extraordinary while they are happening. The greatest risks often emerge when people assume that current conditions will continue indefinitely. Every major cycle eventually reaches a turning point. Debt cycles end, economic booms end, periods of stability end. Understanding this reality allows individuals and institutions to prepare rather than react. Those who recognize changing conditions early are usually in a stronger position than those who ignore warning signs until it is too late. As we look ahead, uncertainty remains high. There may be periods of optimism followed by periods of fear. Markets may rise and fall. Economic indicators may improve and then deteriorate again. But beneath these short-term fluctuations lies a larger question about the future direction of the economy and society. If current trends continue, the next challenge may not resemble the recessions of the past. It could represent a deeper transformation that reshapes how people work, invest, save, and live. And that is why the possibility of something worse than a recession deserves serious attention, not because fear is useful, but because preparation is.